Hi, welcome to the channel, and welcome to another installment of our Masterclass series. This is a series of videos where I am joined by a high level Pokemon player or players to discuss a Pokemon archetype or element of gameplay they're particularly proficient at or with. These videos should hopefully serve as an educational resource for the VGC community as a whole for older and newer players alike. This week we are joined by Justin Tang to talk to us about Calyrex Ice Rider. Justin is a three-time regional champion and one of the strongest players in the world right now. He recently won San Antonio Regionals with Calyrex Ice Rider and also took the Pokemon to the World Championships in 2024. Calyrex Ice Rider is a top meta threat. It has never fallen far from the top usage of restricted Pokemon and has multiple impressive results, including a North American International Championships and a second place finish at World Championship in 2024. Let's get into the chat and see what makes Calyrex Ice so strong. Justin, why don't you introduce yourself and then we'll get into it.
Hi, my name is Justin Tang. I'm a recent three-time regional champion. I just won San Antonio with Ice Rider. So I guess it'd be pretty fitting for me today to go over the Pokemon. But yeah, I've been the last 2 years. VGC was a bit of a rough start for me. It was mostly Kyogre, but I swapped over to Cali Ice since Worlds at Hawaii. And then I've been using Cali Ice for basically since then, beginning of VGC 2.0, where I won San Antonio most recently. And I also finished top 64 at UAC with Fitz. I would say that I'm pretty familiar with Ice Rider after using it for quite some time now.
For sure.
Since Worlds, and I work with some of the. I've been working with some of the best Ice Rider people, mostly Shilang, Tang. I've also been talking to Paul and Shu about Ice Rider. Basically, I feel like with all the Ice Rider people, you kind of just talk with them, and we all share ideas. I even talk to Jody about sometimes. So I would say I have some good ideas on how this Pokemon works for Regulation G.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, we'll get straight into what makes Cali good. These are some sort of basic level notes I've made. Obviously, anyone can look at the stats, the signature move, what it can do, and what Scarlet and Violet's really given them on, which is Clear Amulet and Terra, which really helps it out. Justin, why don't you tell us what makes this such an incredible mon?
Yeah, so I think all your notes here make a lot of sense. I think the big thing of Cali Ice is its stats are incredible. Besides the speed stat. It has phenomenal bulk, so oftentimes people kind of go on all the bulk, and they don't even run as much attack, or sometimes they don't even need to run as much bulk and go more in speed, like I did with Ice Rider, because its natural stats are already so good. So Ice Rider is a very flexible Pokemon on how you want to EV it. That's kind of what makes it really flexible and strong. Glacial Lens, I think this one's kind of funny. I feel that it's kind of a joke that good Ice Rider players click Glacial Lens instead of Trick Room most times. Just because, I don't know, you're clicking Glacial, you're trading damage well with most of the format. Ice is such a good defensive typing where you're hitting most of the restricteds like Miraidon and Cali Shadow for super effective or doing more than half of them. And you're just doing a lot of good damage for it. You also have the option to set up Trick Room to support itself as partners versus faster teams, but that's not always needed, right? And if the engineering knows, you can operate in Tailwind, such as my San Antonio team with the Rory Moon. But it's also, I think, most commonly paired, because before the Tailwind adjustment that we had for San Antonio, I'd say people going fast, they were either doing Icy Wind Fluttermane or Electrowebs from Galecki. Those are also some other good options if you want to go fast without dedicating to Tailwind.
For sure.
Clear Amulets. For this gen, Clear Amulet was a huge buff to Cali Ice. Like Clear Amulet plus Terra. Without Dynamax, I feel like it definitely would struggle a bit without these items in Terra. But with Terra, you can defensively Terra versus common threats like Shiyu. You can defensively Terra for Water Terra, maybe for Kyogre or Urshifu. Or you can do Terra Fairy or Terra Poison for the Zamazenta matchup. And Terra Fairy also gives you value versus Miraidon, Draco Meteor, and such. So it has a load of flexible Terra, just some of the most common ones. We used to see a lot of Terra Fire as well for Will-O-Wisp and such. But I think that's a little bit more easily exposed to Kyogre or Urshifu. And yeah, its ability's broken. You have Unnerve and you have Beast Boost, basically. So you can't go wrong with that ability at all.
Absolutely, yeah, it really is. Yeah, a stupid mon. It can do everything really. Yeah, we're trying to look now at some of its notable results so far. Honestly, there's so many to choose, but I picked out some. Obviously, it's been legal a couple of times so far in Scarlet and Violet, and then it's legal towards the end of Sword and Shield as well. So Worlds had a good showing, came second place, and two more in the top eight, all on quite different styles of team as well. There's not like it proves its sort of flexibility. There's a hard trick room team. There's more a faster version, and then there is you probably call two of them slightly faster versions, and then one a dedicated hard trick room team, and then yours is sort of a tail room team from your recent win and recent second place with Zhiliang. Pat Connors is sort of more of a traditional balance build here with like Incin, Rillarush, Pelipper, Bolt. And then it was still successful in the Sword and Shield era. Portua took it to fourth place at Worlds, proving it can function outside of needing to Terra. Obviously, Terra does help it a lot. The natural typing, offensively good, but defensively suspect. So yeah, what were your thoughts on some of these notable results? Probably your own one is a good one to highlight.
Yeah. So Ice Rider, I would say, is arguably one of the best restricted in Scarlet and Violet. It's had so many wins and results, plenty of top cuts on international level and regional levels and worlds. I guess we can start off with, I can start on mine because it's my team. I think that no one, like I mentioned before, no one was really using Tailwind with Ice Rider. If they were going fast, they're using Icy or E-Webs. So the Tailwind option was able to kind of surprise opponents, so you can go like a faster Ice Rider. You can outspeed Urshifu and Tailwind as such. Just Pokemon that you normally wouldn't outspeed without Tailwind. Roaring Moon, I think, up to this point, was a Pokemon that was also on the rise, but also disrespected. Before this, we only saw really Roaring Moon on Kyogre teams for similar reasons, as a Tailwind nose setter. And to beat Shadow Rider, it's the same thing for an Ice Rider, right? You set up Tailwind 4, and of course you beat Cali Shadow, which, type-wise goes speed Psychic, which Ice Rider is weak to. So the Roaring Moon does cover the Ice Rider weakness really well for the Shadow Rider. The rest of the partners, I think, are really straightforward. You have multiple ways to just abuse Trick Room and Tailwind, because what makes this team unique is our spreads. It's an unconventionally bulky Lando, Urshifu, and Ogerpon. These Pokemon are usually seen to be close to max speed and such, but the Landorus here is slower than Adamant Ursh. Mystic Ursh is slower than all the other Adamant Urshes, basically, and our Heart Flame is Impish, slower than other Urshifus and such. So with these Pokemon, we can use it in Trick Room or in Tailwind as we want, and we use that natural bulk when we don't have the speed control to damage Trick better than our opponents, ideally.
Absolutely. I did. I seeing the regional and seeing some of the speed interaction of the team for the first time. It was really interesting to see, and a lot of the team has been translatable even outside of Calyrex stuff. Like the slow bulky Landorus is I think it definitely exists more, and I've loved using bulky Lando now. It's surprising how much longevity you can sort of get out of it if you invest in the bulk.
Yep. Exactly. And also a little uncultured thing was the terror on Lando. I think all the Landorus terrors at this point were either poison or ghost.
Yeah.
Ghost was most commonly Scarf, but poison was the default on the Sheer Force Life Orb 1. But we opt for the water for the mirror, and defensively you're resisting Ursh, and will follow Mirror Rage Powder. You can redirect away the things of water as weak too.
For sure.
So this pairs really nice with Ice Rider. I think NJ here, who got 7th of Worlds, had a very similar team of Lando, Ice Rider, and same as Utah. I think that Lando just covers for Ice Rider super well, because Landorus can beat Incineroar, which is another weakness of Ice Rider, of course, to get rid of all the fire types. And it's also really good for Miraidon as well. Depends on if you have a fit. Scarf Lando can remove Miraidon early as well. While Ice Rider is good versus Miraidon, you definitely need that Rage Powder or Follow Mage so you don't get killed with Drift and such. So having Landorus here outpace it with that choice Scarf, or with Life Orb with that speed control, makes it a really good partner for it. You also just beat all of Marina's partners. With the combination of Sandseer Glacial, you pin the whole format, basically.
Yeah.
So it's a really excellent partner on any team. So that's why I was a huge fan of Landorus.
Yeah.
Another really good Pokemon with Ice Rider is Amoonguss, like I had here, and also Yuta's team. I think that one of the biggest weaknesses as well for Ice Rider is Zamazenta. So with that Amoonguss, you have game plans into it. You also have good game plans into Urshifu. Yeah, like the combination of Zamazenta, Urshifu, and Genesis in general, like Amoonguss just walls out. You have that Spore and Rage Powder Pressure to rid out those hits or put things to sleep, so your Ice Rider can do things it wants.
Absolutely.
So that's why I think Amoonguss is a really good partner for that. And of course, all of these teams here basically have Urshifu minus Diego. And this is just because, again, Urshifu is really good at using the Trick Room when you get Ice Rider. It's also really good with being down Incineroar and such. And yeah, that's really it. With Pelipper, you can forego Focus Sash and such just for getting that extra damage. But for NJ and my team, we went Mystic Water just for extra damage all around because we don't have Rain.
Yeah.
No, I think that's some important things to know as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. Like, it's clear that like it's really versatile as a restricted as opposed to some stuff which has sort of got quite set builds. Like you can really run all sorts of team, and like even like looking back into previous formats, like we dual restricted. We don't know when it's coming, but it's probably coming. And like Paul's already shown how it's done with dual restricted. He had a really cool Ice Rider team with Palkia, got fourth at Worlds. That was the season I started watching VGC. So I've fond memories of this team. It's a really cool, and like obviously Paulcho is one of the great Ice Rider players as well. So I think I think it's got a lot to offer going forward as well. I don't think it's going to be really strong in dual restricted as well. So what we're going to now talk about is what, as the expert, like you've already alluded to part of the strategy, just click Glacial Lance. Like how do you pilot Calyrex Ice? Like when do you protect? When do you click Trick Room? When do you just sit and just press Glacial 6 times to game?
It depends on the build of Ice Rider, to be honest, and like of course the matchup. So when you're facing Tailwind teams, I would say you can go for Trick Room. When you can, like if you're facing let's say Whimsicott and such. Let's say you root the Whims early, or you follow me away to South Encore, then Trick Room is usually quite safe. The only worry about Trick Room versus faster teams is they usually have some way to deny it, or a way to abuse your own Trick Room as well. Like most commonly on these Miraidon comps, they might have the Frigoraph with Electricity and Foul Play, or they have the Min Speed Iron Hands. So there's some worries about setting up Trick Room for your opponent, basically. So sometimes you can basically just kind of spam Glacial to damage trade. So like with my team at least, I don't usually go for Trick Room always, because sometimes I'm set to Trick Room for either their bulky Heartflame, Frigoraph, or Ursh, which can be quite awkward, or their hands. So I often just the Glacial and then clean up with Sandseer plus like Tailwind endgame. That usually is pretty good if they don't have back Whimsicott, or if they don't bring Whims, Landorus is usually pretty good at clean up late game with your own support speed control. So that'll play pretty similarly with the Scarf Lendo variants if they don't bring Whims, or the ones with like either Aleki or Flutter, because if they don't bring Whims, you can kind of clean up with your faster Mon in the back, basically. So that's when you kind of know when to click Trick Room or attack, usually. In the mirror, you're usually just kind of clicking Glacial if you want your Ursh to outpace it. Usually you can click Trick Room if you have your own Amoonguss. And if your opponent doesn't have any Amoonguss answers, you can kind of maybe just go for Trick Room early, and you can spore most of their partners, ideally, because usually in these Ice Rider comps, they don't always have great spore immunities. So you can spore most of your teammates. Let's see what else. Other terms you could Trick Room is if you're reading like a reverse Trick Room. That's sort of a kind of a gimmick, or not gimmick. It's sort of it's a big call. I don't always like this play because if you get it wrong, you can potentially game losing. But it's kind of a fun play you can switch up if you're reading like maybe the Ice Rider mirror. You read reverse your Trick Room, you click Trick Room again, right? So that's also a funny play you can go for. Let's see how else you pilot. But yeah, most times you're kind of clicking Glacial. High Horsepower is another good move, of course, to get Incineroar and such. You usually click High Horsepower to hit Incin, Chiyu, maybe get around Wyguard. Those are the main things.
Yeah.
And sometimes you see these Ice Riders tech out for close combat as well. I think that that did do well at San Antonio as well. That they top 8. I think that some people can do that to tech around for Imprison Ice Rider, which is another way you can pilot. We didn't get to talk much about Diego's team from last time, but Diego top 8 worlds with Terra Dragon and Prison Ice Rider. So another way you can pilot is in these hard trigger teams of Imprison. So with Terra Dragon, you imprison the Grace of Lance so that in the mirror they can't hit you. And then you can just you basically are beating them without their restricted because you prison all their moves. Yeah. So that's another way you can pilot a hard trigger.
Absolutely. It's yeah, you can see it's because it's so flexible as well, it's a bit of a best of one demon as well. I think it's probably one of the most consistent GC restricted because it can do so much. I know that there was an imprisoned body press one to get around Zama last time, and like you consistently see stuff like Assault Vest or my group ran Lumberry this time in the GC. Like so many, in open sheets, like it's usually never melt ice, but really it's clear amulet. But I think it because of its sort of bulk and flexibility, you see all sorts in closed sheets, which is obviously it's important for people's invites is to get good GC results at the moment. Like it matters more. So what are your thoughts on it as a best of one? Are you interested in sort of mixing it up, or do you just stick to the clear amulet stuff?
It depends. It's kind of funny. I was actually talking to a friend about this. He was saying that that clear amulet is not a item that gets propped much in the GC because I think Incineroar usage is a lot lower, especially when you're playing with the other regions. I think Japanese players tend to not always use Incineroar on their teams, and that's why we saw other items like you mentioned. Nevermelt Ice is a pretty good item as well. Especially if you have enough Incineroar hate, I think Nevermelt Ice is definitely a better item because you just deal more damage, of course. You've also have options with AV. AV Ice Rider did really well last Global Challenge with Alexander Hill. He got, I think, 10th place with Heatran and AV Ice Rider. It's really good at kind of surprise your opponent with either surprise Seed Bombs or even Crunch to kill Shadow Rider, which is really funny. Because everyone kind of expects you to collect Trick Room at certain times, but if you don't have Trick Room and you have 4 attacks, they will never say coming, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely really good in the Global Challenge. And most recently, the Leech Seed Ice Rider with Citrus Berry won the GC. So there's definitely a lot of unorthodox ways you can run Ice Rider. It just, like we talked about, it has so many good stats and so many good moves. You can use it on almost any team.
Yeah. And
there's a reason why it won this Global Challenge. It also has some of the most consistent results online for CTS or for S3. So yeah.
Absolutely. Now we're just going to go on and look at sort of building a Ice Rider team. So like obviously you guys have just done it. You've just built a great Ice Rider team. It's everywhere now. It's a team that everyone has to prep for. It's a team that popped up the week before I played regional, and it's a team that I had to be super aware of. So yeah, like say you're building building a new Ice Rider team. Like what are the pieces you usually want to build around on an Ice Rider team? Like I know we've already discussed Lando is a really good fit, but what else do you sort of see on an Ice Rider build? Like what pieces can you sort of tack on? These are some of the things that I think make a good Ice Rider team, but obviously add your thoughts as well.
Right. Honestly, you can throw any mon. Like, if you start with the most common partners you see on most Ice Rider comps, I think the main one's Urshifu. Like I mentioned earlier, Urshifu beats Incineroar. It just has really good synergy in Trick Room as well. They can't protect the stall if you have Surging plus Glacial Pins, right? Ice Rider kind of checks for Urshifu weaknesses, such as Miraidon and Rillaboom, right, like Glacial Lance. So they have really good synergy there too. You also most commonly see Ice Rider with at least one form of redirection. So it's either going to be Ogerpon or Among Us, or both, like my team. But most commonly, it's either one or the other. So, like, Among Us is really good again for beating Zamazenta, and Dondozo is also another main one I think to mention, just because Ice Rider can't beat Dondozo. Usually, they just tech out this, just for Pollen Puff. It's either Last, Sludge Bomb, or Clear Smog. I think Clear Smog actually did pretty well at the UIC as well, the top 4. He also actually had Among Us and Cornerstone actually set a Heart Flame. So you can still run the double redirect for that option. Cornerstone is also a really good pick right now just because it does pair really well with Ice Rider. You run Hearthstone or Cornerstone, but Cornerstone actually has a more offensive capability.
Yeah.
With second Ice Rider weaknesses with opposing Urshifu, because you're fast, you can kill a Power Whip, or you can either kill your Butter Incineroars Roars and such.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on just Teal Mask? Because I know that's what you ran at Worlds. Like,
right.
Is it still, does it still exist, or do you think it's sort of that was just a call for Worlds and?
It was definitely a cool call for Worlds. It was more teched out for the Shadow Rider teams with Among Us. So with Teal Mask, you get Defiant from Ensign. You ignore Among Us with that Grass Thing, and Bullet Seed can KO all the Sash Urshifus. But a lot of these Cali Shadow teams right now are taking Heart Flame and such, so I think that actually tends to be a little bit worse. And also, I think Zamazenta was a little bit weaker matchup with this variant of the team. So I think it was definitely stronger for the Worlds metagame.
Yeah.
But I do think that the team is still okay. I believe they did have a day 2 at San Antonio. But it's a bit harder to use than I think other Ice Rider teams in the current format. It's a cool option. There's so many grass types you want in that slot. People have also run Rillaboom, although I think Rillaboom's not really amazing right now on that team, just because it doesn't really help with much. Like, I know Patrick Connors had it, but I think that team has kind of fell off a little bit in the game right now because it's a little bit weak to Shadow Rider and such.
Yeah.
So I'm not really a huge fan of Rillaboom. Also, Rillaboom, it only does so much in a Rider matchup. You're just too weak to Flame, and they have to regret if they brought the Fake Out. I think that having Redirection usually gives you more value than Fake Out in that matchup because of that.
Sure, yeah. What are your... I mean, we've discussed the other three Pokemon. Do you think Wellspring's got a place, or do you think it's just like, because Urshifu is so indispensable on Ice Rider that just Wellspring sort of doesn't really fit the comp?
Oh, Wellspring?
Yeah.
I mean, Wellspring can fit. I mean, Diego top 8 world with Wellspring, but I don't know if it's the best form of Ogerpon. It probably is maybe a little bit more better than Teal Mask in the current format, but yeah, Urshifu just tends to be a better partner. Wellspring was on that team, I'm guessing, for mostly Kyogre, and just to guarantee trick him up, because Diego set was Taunt, Ivy Cudgel, Woodhammer, Follow Me, a very offensive support set, so basically to guarantee Trick Room, and then to taunt the Among Us or maybe Instance with Will-O-Wisp, right, and such. But yeah, most commonly you'd rather have Urshifu, I feel. Urshifu, Raptor Strike didn't really work on that team because he had Torkoal and such, right?
Yeah.
And maybe his features were maybe too weird for him because he was a dedicated Heart Trick team. But I definitely like the other forms of Ogerpon or Urshifu better than Wellspring for Ice Rider.
For sure. And then I suppose the last sort of form partners you want is sort of your Techmons. Like, what do you... Yeah, I suppose your San Antonio team, the Techmon's probably the Roaring Moon, because that sort of wasn't usually seen on the teams at the time. Now it's a bit more commonplace.
Right.
But is that just what do you think about other sort of Patchmons, Techmons, speed control pieces? Like, we've seen a bit of a Lecky. What other things do you think? Yeah. What other kind of things do you think could be cool pieces on an Ice Rider team if someone's looking to build one?
Right. So I mean, I already mentioned a few of them. Like, Alecki is a good example because that top 8 worlds, just fast EWS plus Glacial is really strong. The Bolt Beam coverage is just really powerful. You can apply the same concept to Raging Bolt. While Raging Bolt is a little bit slower, most times they run fast with Assault Vest and Electro Webs. Yeah. For that same combo, Bolt can also function in Trick Room as well. So that's also another good partner for Cali Ice. You can also run Flutter Mane. Flutter Mane does something similar to Roaring Moon, just speed control all around. It also beats Urshifu, and it can kind of be Shadow Rider via Shadow Ball, right? You can force Terra on it. So it's not awful. And Flutter Mane also supports your other partners on those teams. It's also a good partner for your own Urshifu or maybe your own Shiyu and such. Common partners you might see on Ice Rider as well. So that last slot kind of providing the extra form of speed control, I think, is correct. You either go all in with Roaring Moon, Flutter, or Lecky, or maybe go a more traditional balance route with Raging Bolt. I think that one, Paul Chua did really well recently as well, top 32 UAC. And I believe Juan Fee also won a regional with AB Raging Bolt plus Scarflando, another alternative way you can run Ice Rider on balance teams.
Cool, no, that's brilliant. And that brings us to the end of the masterclass. And that's all from us, so thanks again, Justin, for coming on. Do really appreciate you taking the time to come on. Any things you'd like to plug, any socials, and then we'll get out of it.
Oh, yeah. You guys can follow me on Unironic Panda on Twitter and Unironic Panda -VGC on YouTube. But that's really plugins. But I thank you for having me on.
No worries. Thanks again for coming on. You can find me on Twitter, Twitch and YouTube, all at the Postman P. And we will see you next time.